The Red Sea has emerged as a flashpoint in the Middle East as Houthi rebels have increased the frequency and intensity of their naval attacks despite intensive efforts by the US-led coalition in Yemen, including airstrikes targeting hundreds of locations, including Houthi arsenal's ballistic missile launch pads and headquarters. The Houthi has continued to attack commercial and military vessels. Due to the ongoing violence, the United States has designated the Houthi as a global terrorist organization. This is aimed at preventing the Houthis from obtaining financial resources to support their activities. Today, US ships and submarines launched a new wave of attacks on Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen. On Thursday, the US military directly hit the Houthi organization in Yemen for the fourth time in recent days. According to US officials, the US military launched a second wave of missile strikes on Houthi-controlled areas. On Wednesday, the missile strikes were launched from ships and submarines. The Hamas war continues to spread across the Middle East. The strikes come after the US formally announced that it had reinstated the Houthi to its list of global terrorist designation. Sanctions linked to the official classification are aimed at cutting off funding sources for violent extremist groups. The officials spoke on condition of anonymity to disclose previously unpublished material later. On Wednesday, our Central Command, CENTCOM, released a report stating that heavy airstrikes were conducted on 14 Iranian-backed Houthi missile teams that were loaded for firing into Houthi-soaked areas in Yemen. The US has launched 4 waves of strikes against Houthi rebels in Yemen. In the past week, Tomahawk missiles launched from ships and submarines were used over the past day to launch a new wave of missile strikes on Houthi-controlled territory. According to US officials, later in the day, US Central Command, commonly known as CENTCOM, announced that it had intercepted 14 Houthi missiles targeting Iranian-backed and Houthi-held targets in Yemen. CENTCOM said in a statement that the missiles pose an immediate and that the strikes would make it more difficult for the Houthis to continue their reckless attack on international and commercial shipping. In strikes last night, the US targeted Houthi headquarters and missile teams with Iranian-supplied missiles. Internal sources in US claim that the US bombings have killed a large number of Houthi militants, although there have been few reports of strikes. The US Navy fired ballistic missiles and bomb-laden drones in retaliation for 2 successive Houthi attacks on US cargo ships overnight. Air strikes also destroyed Houthi ballistic missile and fighter jet arsenals. According to Pentagon Press Secretary Major General Pat Ryder, the US will continue to use military force to prevent further Houthi attacks. They are taking advantage of the current situation to attack ships and boats in more than 50 countries around the world. We will continue to work with our friends in the region to prevent or deter similar attacks. The Houthi attacks on the US Navy and cargo ships were the final nail in the coffin. In fact, same can be said of Iran in the last week. Iranian-funded Houthis have launched attacks on US warships and cargo ships, putting Iran in a precarious legal position. Intelligence from behind the scenes in Tan suggests that Iran blames the recalcitrant leader of the Houthi political organization. Casualties. Iran has even taken deceptive steps to clean up the wreckage created by the Houthis. 2 days ago, Iran tried to divert attention from Pakistan, Iraq, and Syria. But in the meantime, the Houthis have gone on a new spree attacking ships. Once again, this led to a surge in Iranian lobbying, but swiftest action neutralized Iran's attempts to divert attention. The US administration is showing that it is fully equipped and prepared to counter Iran's proxies, as evidenced by the recent attacks by US warships, submarines, and bombers. It is unclear how the Houthis in Iran will react, what cards it will play, and how the US Navy will prepare for the new dynamics in the Middle East. A few days ago, the US raided an Arab ship and seized ballistic missile components. According to Iran, delivered them to Yemen. One of the 2 US Navy SEALs involved in the operation is still missing after being pushed off the ship by a wave during the seizure. The other SEAL followed the SEAL who fell overboard. The US then issued a stern warning to Iran, asking it to stop sending arms This since the US launched the operation against the Hamas. Several incidents have occurred over the weekend. This is attempted to destroy a US Navy destroyer by firing an anti-ship cruise missile. However, the missile was intercepted and destroyed. However, two important questions need to be addressed. First, whether this red designation will be effective in reducing the Houthi capabilities and aggression, given their previous resistance and support from Iran. Second, given the host's sophisticated weaponry, including ballistic missiles and drones. How will the United States and its allies change tactics to eliminate this growing threat without exacerbating Yemen's humanitarian crisis? These concerns are critical to understanding the future trajectory of this conflict, as well as its implications for regional stability and global maritime trade. As officially described by us, President Joe Biden, economic sanctions are being imposed to separate violent extremist groups from their sources of support. According to Kabir Tanja of the Strategic Studies APRAM at the Observer Research Foundation, the removal of the US from the terrorist list in February 2021 was due to the pressure the Biden administration faced when the Hayus refused to allow any aid to reach the Yemeni people. It also helped the Saudis, who have been at war with the House since 2015 and have been holding open negotiations, and just said, yes, internationally recognized President Abdul Mansour had he handed over his powers to a presidential council in April 2022 and negotiated a deal to halt the fighting. This ceasefire, despite its weakness, remains in force to this day, with evidence that it has been sustained by successful prisoner exchange attempts between the two opposing forces. However, the White House designated the Houthis as a specially designated global terrorist organization. This design was made last week. Tanja described the incident as the direct result of the Houthi campaign against international shipping in the Red Sea. He made this comment a few hours ago. The Houthi attack on merchant ships on the Red Sea route, which accounts for 12% of global maritime trade, has caused an increase of up to 60% in the transportation costs of goods traveling from Asia to Europe. Container Exchange is an online container logistics platform that allows you to trade and rent containers. The ceasefire finally reached in April 2022 between the warring parties in Yemen's civil war was the product of years of diplomacy led by Saudi Arabia. The US are in extensive negotiations with Saudi Arabia, a US ally, over a Saudi withdrawal from Yemen. This is not a good time to make such a characterization, said Yus Arviel Hilterman, director of the Middle East and North Africa program at the International Crisis Group. From our perspective, such definitions are counterproductive because there is no generally accepted definition of terrorist organization, which is a highly politicized term. The US has had to create a multinational naval task force to combat the US, who have become Yemen's most powerful fighting machine. This is because the US threaten economic channels. The Red Sea, the Biden administration had no intention of making such a designation against any group without provocation. Hilterman said the Houthis staged a parade in the Yemeni capital Sana'a on September 21st, just weeks before Hamas attack on southern Israel on October 7th. This attack is considered to be the most violent conflict the region has seen in recent years. During the march, an irregular army was seen armed with a variety of weapons. There were mailer boats and mate cargo helicopters, often used to lay mines in the ocean. The Houthis are currently launching attacks on critical shipping routes using sea mines and air power. They have amassed throughout their presence. The Houthis possess the Fledermaus radar surfact to air missiles, improvised armor and T-55 tanks. Numerous other military systems. The Houthis are also equipped with F-15 supersonic light fighter jets and Toshka-class ballistic missiles. They also possess Iranian ballistic missiles known as Hatam-e-Shikan B4, in addition to drones, loose bombs and Iranian Shahab 3 Beta missiles. There is an unknown number of Rakib drones with a range of up to 1,400 km. Passive infrared surveillance technologies are also part of this arsenal, as the armament shows this enormous improvement in the Houthis capabilities is indicative Iranian government support for the movement Tehran sees This urgent Shiite organization as part of a larger opposition to the US. And Israel, the House have benefited from Iranian structural and institutional support. This has given them capabilities ranging from ballistic and anti-ship, missiles to underwater weapons and drones. All of this would not have been possible without Iran's help. Yemen's 32 million people are among the poorest and hungriest in the world as a result of years of conflict between the Iran-backed Houthis. And the Saudi-led coalition officials from the Biden administration have claimed they will impose financial penalties on the Houthis to reduce the impact of the conflict on the Yemeni people. But aid officials have expressed concerns, according to Scott Paul, Deputy Director of Oxfam. The move will add a new level of uncertainty and threat to Yemenis still caught in one of the world's worst humanitarian crises.